The Dallas-Fort Worth community always says yes to supporting elementary students, and now that yes can win you a brand new 2022 truck. DFW Yes provides school supplies to more than 78,000 students across Texas. Give your yes today by purchasing raffle tickets in our Drive Away for Education truck raffle sponsored by Thomas J. Henry. The grand prize winner will choose from a new Ram, Chevrolet, GMC, Ford, or Nissan truck. Plus, you could win a shopping spree or gas card. Purchase your raffle ticket today at dfwyes.org.
So anyway, but let's talk a little bit about the game because this is our first time all of us talking here about it since it ended. And Craven, the question I think everybody kind of has asked, who covered the game, who watched the game, when did you kind of get a feeling that this was gonna be? Obviously, 65-7 is hard to predict, but when did you kind of get a feeling of like, oh, they have a mountain to climb?
Yeah, probably that third touch or the second or third touchdown for Georgia. TCU came back and made it 10-7, and it was like, okay, the offense found something there at the end of their script. If the defense can get a stop, all of a sudden TCU goes down, gets a field goal or a touchdown. They're right in this game. And I'm one of those people that believes that these football games don't have just one outcome, right? Sure. Just because we saw an outcome doesn't mean that's exactly what would have happened in 1,000 different scenarios in 1,000 different cases. Had TCU been able to get a stop early, tie that game, maybe take a lead, maybe things are different. But it became obvious pretty quickly that they had no shot at stopping Georgia. It didn't matter if they were able to score points or not. Georgia was going to score at will, and they ended up scoring 9 touchdowns in 11 possessions. One of those other ones was a field goal and then 1 punt. And so, it looked from pretty early on, you could tell that this was going to be a long night for TCU. Max Duggan was going to have to play the game of his life. They were going to have to win a big-time shootout, and they just did not have that.
Yeah, I think for me, I think that's a good way to put it because I think that was one matchup we kind of didn't really talk enough about because obviously Georgia's strength is defense, and obviously TCU's offense has been the story of their season. But I'll take blame for this as well. Our coverage, and I feel like national coverage as well, didn't really talk about the Georgia offense versus the TCU defense a lot. Obviously, the 3-3-5 was the discussion point because that was the discussion point against Michigan. And, can they match up the physicality? It was kind of a general discussion, but it wasn't as much as like, okay, what does Stetson Bennett look like against this defense, right? It wasn't as much about that. I think we just kind of thought that'd be the lesser matchup than the strength on strength on the other side. And that's one that kind of decided the game in terms of like this being an unwinnable feat for TCU because it wasn't just the fact that they couldn't move the ball. It was also that, even if they could have, they weren't stopping, right? They weren't stopping Stetson Bennett. They didn't even have to use their wide receivers much. It was Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey, and they lined up Darnell Washington a couple times. And, it was mostly that side of the ball where I was like, oh, this is that side of the ball is where my eyebrows really raised, where it was like, oh, this is where the mismatches really are.
I thought in the beginning, I thought that TCU did an okay job with taking Georgia's run away just a little bit. Sure. Of course, like Georgia has other weapons, at the wide receiver spot, and it's Stetson Bennett, of course. But I kind of thought that they did an okay job with stopping the run just a little bit until they got really tired, and then Georgia could beat them up in multiple different ways.
Sure.
But I thought they did okay at first, and then, it kind of started to deteriorate just a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, Georgia averaged 16.8 yards a completion, 12 yards an attempt. They had 335 passing yards, and they only completed 20 passes. I mean, it was the big plays down the field, and I think y'all are right. I think the talking points were obviously TCU offense versus Georgia defense. And then when we did talk about the Georgia offense, it was like, how is that 3-3-5 going to work against the physicality of the Georgia run game and the 12 personnel? But Stetson Bennett, kind of put a bow on his career. People are calling him the best player in Georgia history. I was super impressed with him. And I can't tell you, maybe Bijan Robinson is the only other player this year I saw in person that was like, holy crap, that dude needs to be in the NFL tomorrow more than Brock Bowers. Like, that kid is unbelievable. Like, he needs a waiver to, like, be able to skip more college. There's no reason he needs to be playing college football anymore. He's a top 10 draft pick. He's going to be an incredible NFL player.
Yeah, the fact that they have both him and Darnell Washington, like, lining up at tight end is stupid. The one other thing that I mentioned, I think Splits on Duo mentioned this point, and I didn't think about this until they mentioned it. They talked about how the field goal that Georgia took was probably the most disrespectful early field goal because it was like in TCU territory. They could have gone for it.
They could have gone for it.
And it was like, oh no, they're not going to score, so it doesn't matter. Like we'll take the 3 here. And I forgot what it put them. I think it was 7. I think it put them up 17-7.
7-10. Or I think it. Oh, okay.
I think.
No, it was 10-0.
10-0. Okay, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. And but it was more or less like, yeah, that's fine. Right, yeah, we'll take like against Alabama, against any other team. You feel like they probably go for that and then try to keep the foot on the gas. But it was more or less like we're going to get it back and we're going to be fine.
Yeah.
And the only play TCU really had was the busted coverage to Darius Davis. And that, it is funny how TCU seemingly always gets a play, whether it's Quentin Johnson or Davis or Tay Barber, they always end up with somebody being wide open because of a busted coverage or some type of miss. And I thought, okay, here he comes, right? They find these little, mismatches, or not even mismatches, but just misreads in the secondary, and they make a play off of it, and that was all they had. Quentin Johnston was held. I mean, credit to Georgia's defense. Quentin Johnston was held
3 yards, right?
Yeah, 3 yards, 1 catch. And he was the focus, right? He's the reason why that busted coverage happened, because he cut inside, and both the safety and the corner both bit, and Darius Davis was on the outside wide open, and that was the one play TCU had. No shame to Amari DiMarcado. I mean, it's hard to go against that front seven, but obviously when you're the only running option they had, right, with no Kendre Miller there, it was just it was going to be an uphill battle the whole night, and it quickly became obvious that Georgia was just going to give them the sidelines and say, yeah, that's fine. You're not going to get anything. Like, we're quick enough to where your screen game isn't going to work. I think that was Quentin Johnston's only catch was a screen. And your kind of short routes with Tay Barber and Darius Davis aren't going to work either. So, yeah, it just kind of, unfortunately, Georgia, I mean, we watched a juggernaut kind of just work and flex, more or less.
Did you see Georgia ordered chicken wings on the sideline, like during the game?
Oh my God!
They were so bored.
SoFi, they have those booths like at AT&T, so they were just taking food from like the
That's amazing.
Georgia fans behind the bench.
Oh my God,
that's incredible.
I saw that their program sent out the.
I think one of the big points here was Max Duggan needed to be perfect for TCU to have a chance. He was going to have to do what C.J. Stroud did the week before, and we talked about that last week. He was going to have to throw for 300 yards and a few touchdowns. He was going to have to run around. He got sacked 5 times. He had minus 38 rushing yards. He only completed 14 of 22 passes. That first drive when they had the ball first, Quentin Johnston came open on that third down play, and he overthrew him. He had him wide open. That would have been a touchdown, maybe flipped the momentum of that game. I think Georgia still wins by a lot of points, but I think it's a closer game if TCU comes out of the gates and scores that one. And if you look over the last 3 games, this is a TCU team that finished 1-2. Didn't win the Big 12 championship, didn't win the national championship. And a lot of that's because Duggan came back to earth. He was around 50% completions over that last 3 games. He only threw, I think, 3 interceptions the first 12 games of the year. He threw 5 total in the last 3. And so 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions on his part. His running game couldn't get going. And TCU just did not stand a chance without him being great. And I think it just shows his value throughout the year because he carried this team for a lot of the year. Without Kendre Miller, without Max Duggan, they really just stood no shot.
Yeah, and let's kind of look at the discussion that's surrounding the game now. There's a lot of discussion about, was it even worth making? Yeah, it was worth making it, right? Like that's not the discussion I want to have. But there were some interesting questions posed to me in the space that kind of reflect fair discussion in terms of like, is this game a good showcase for the Big 12, right? Is making it a good showcase for the Big? Let's leave TCU out of it, but just like talk about in terms of the Big 12, right? A lot of one person asked, like, does this justify A&M or not A&M? Kind of A&M 10 years ago, Texas and Oklahoma. Does it justify their kind of mindset, right? In terms of like, there's a ceiling with some of these programs, right? I'm not saying. I'm saying this is what some people believe and some people say, that there is a ceiling, right? There is a recruiting ceiling that Bud Elliott mentioned the 5-star ratio, right? You have to have 50% or more 4 or 5 stars on your roster to win a national title, right? That has literally been the thing for as long as we can remember, at least in this modern era. Every national champion has had a certain amount of elite talent. Is it possible, or did this justify or not maybe that Texas and Oklahoma thinking that maybe there is a ceiling, or Or if you are TCU and you're somebody in the Big 12, is this somebody saying, hey, look what can happen when we haven't even touched the surface, or the ceiling, I should say, of what Sonny Dykes' TCU could look like? Look what he did in 1 year. Is this just kind of like a natural stepping stone of kind of seeing where you need to go?
Well, I mean, I think the first point is we need to clarify that Texas and Oklahoma aren't leaving the Big 12 to the SEC to crash some kind of ceiling.
Sure, 100%.
They're trying to make money.
Yes.
Texas goes undefeated or 12-1 in the regular season. They're going to the college football playoff no matter what conference they play in. Same for Oklahoma. Same for USC out in the Pac-12. That had nothing to do with competitive balance or anything. That had to do with cash. And so I think if you're the Big 12, with the playoff expansion happening pretty soon, it doesn't matter. If you have a season like TCU just had, you're going to go to the college football playoff every single year. And so, I think that erases some of that perception need. Because if this was 3 years ago and that happened to TCU, I'd totally have that conversation. But I think in the evolving world of what college football is going to be looking like in 2024 and beyond, if you have a TCU type run, you're going to make it, and you can go win those football games and change that perception year in, year out. So it doesn't really matter what the national thoughts are about your conference. You're going to get in there and have your chance to either prove them right or to prove them wrong.
Sure. One of your takeaways that I loved from if you haven't checked it out, TexasFootball.com. One of your takeaways I liked a lot from LA was, this game was a showcase of how the Cinderella story doesn't always play out perfectly, right? In college football, we do love it, right? We saw it this year with Tulane, right, beating USC. Of course, Boise State over Oklahoma. We love these kind of stories. And yeah, it was awesome that TCU, a team that did not make a bowl last year, new head coach, things like that, kind of shocked the nation and not only made the playoff, but won a playoff game, right? That is a legitimate accomplishment. But it still showed that it doesn't always, eventually, you mentioned it, Goliath sometimes wins, right? Goliath sometimes remembers that he's 7 feet tall and David is a 12-year-old boy, or however old he was in the Bible story. But this shows to me that I kind of made this argument because somebody asked kind of like about what it means for TCU. And does it hurt their recruiting or hurt their national stance? I don't think it does. And I'm curious about your thoughts on this. To me, if I'm Sonny Dykes, I use this as, look what I was able to do when I didn't even have my real footprint in this program, right? I took a lot of the guys that have already been here. I coached them up, right? We put a different scheme around them. We added some pieces defensively through the group of five. But now look at what we're adding. We're adding Tommy Brockermeyer. We're adding JoJo Earl, right? We're adding guys that are like potentially that were literally Alabama Power 5 SEC national title caliber. We're adding those type of guys now, right? So at least in my opinion, sure, right now you're going to be the joke of a lot of people's circles. Sure, 65-7, that's never a good look. But long term, I think this helps Sonny Dykes' project, and I would assume it would help his recruiting as well, because as we've seen, it's not going to drop off because, okay, cool, you made it to the national title and you got blown out. Okay, that's still making it to a national title, something that a Texas team hasn't done in over 10 years.
Right, and you're going to decommit from TCU and to go where, right? It's not like your choice is TCU or Georgia, and you were picking TCU a week before this game, and now that you saw that, you're going to flip to Georgia, right? Like TCU, you can't lose what you've never had, and TCU's not recruiting the top 10 players in the state or the nation anyway, and so the guys that they're recruiting, the teams that they're recruiting against, they just had a stellar season compared to that second tier of college football elite, and that's okay. It's okay to admit what you are. Where TCU is going to get those big 5-star, high 4-star guys is through the transfer portal, and Sonny Dykes has already proven that it's working there. Like as you mentioned, the names that you just talked about, Sonny had 6 transfers on official visits while the week of the national championship game was going on, and so I don't think it hurts them in recruiting. They made over $2 billion in terms of free marketing for their university, for that football program. They're going to be able to add bigger staff. They're going to be able to upgrade facilities. The money is going to flow into that program based on what they did this last year. If you're a TCU fan, I know the social media jokes probably hurt your feelings a little bit, but where this program was on January 11th, 2022, and where the program is January 11th, 2023,
night and day.
could not have even been predicted. It can't be seen.
Yeah.
And so you have to keep a little bit of perspective, realize that this was the best year in TCU history, maybe, and they're going to reap the benefits of that, year in, year out moving forward, I believe. I think it's an advantage, not a disadvantage, even though it was disappointing on Monday night.
Sure, 100%. And so, with that, we'll put a little bow on our coverage of this season. We'll be back next week and weeks after with postmortems and kind of going through teams, reviewing their seasons. Mike Craven will also start his postmortems on the website. I'm kind of going through, good, bad. I mean, literally that's the way he phrased it in the article: good, the bad, the ugly. What they need to work on, what there's optimism for, maybe some pessimism about, things like that. So that'll be kind of in the coming weeks on TexasFootball.com and through us, Republic of Football.